Before this video begins, I want to quickly say that this video is going to contain spoilers for the Like a Dragon Yakuza TV show made by Amazon Prime. So I'm going to be going over the first 3 episodes, and I'm also going to be referencing some stuff from Yakuza Kiwami and maybe some games later down the line as well. So there's going to be spoilers in this video. So if you're not familiar with Yakuza as a game series, or even seen the first 3 episodes of the TV series, there's going to be a lot of spoilers. So I do recommend clicking away, but you've been warned. So let's get right into this. I don't want this video to be too long. I just want to get my overall opinions and thoughts out after watching the first 3 episodes. Let's answer the title of this video instantaneously. Is the adaptation good? And my answer, it's really fucking good. I really like this adaptation. This adaptation isn't a one-to-one replica to the original game. It isn't a one-to-one replica to Kiwami. It's its own story. It's its own adaptation, and I really do like this adaptation. Now, I understand that a lot of people are going to watch this and I'm going to be really, displeased that this isn't adapting the game one-to-one. But I think a lot of people also have to realize that Yakuza 1 isn't a perfect story. It isn't a perfect story, and it isn't the most engaging story as a Yakuza fan. Personally, as someone who loves the Yakuza series, I can definitely admit that Yakuza 1 is one of the weakest games in the series, in my opinion. I think that's due to a lot of factors, but mostly due to the characters don't get much characterization. A lot of the story beats from Yakuza 0 feel pointless because they're not carried over in the remake, aka Kiwami, and a bunch of other stuff. And also, I feel like a lot of stuff as well is neglected, since obviously it's such a long running series. A lot of characters and events don't get referenced that should probably be referenced in the first game. And this adaptation basically just follows its own timeline of events, basically. And by doing that, it can tell the original story but their own twist on it. And I think it does it really well. This show does a really good job of basically telling you the story of Yakuza 1 so far, also telling you its own story, if that makes sense. Now, this series does a lot of flashbacks. It does a lot of flashbacks from, the early years in the orphanage as Kiryu, Yumi, Nishiki, and his little sister, Nishiki's little sister. I forgot her name already. As they're, really young kids, to where they're a little bit older, to where 2005. And it's really interesting to see, the flashbacks and the progression these characters have taken, and it really does make you feel for them. One of my biggest issues with the original game is that characters like Nishiki and Yumi are supposed to be really close to Kiryu, but you never really get the sense that they're close. Like, even after playing Yakuza 0, I never really got the sense that Kiryu and Nishiki were like super tight. Yeah, I could definitely tell they were friends and they cared for each other, but it never felt like a bond between brothers. And in this show, it really does feel like a bond between brothers, if that makes sense. You see Kiryu really loosen up a lot with Nishiki. You see like how much he cares for Nishiki and how he's willing to really put his life on the line after a little screw up happens at the beginning of the first episode with them robbing the Yakuza, the Dojima family to be exact, and how Kiryu's willing to put his life on the line for Nishiki, Nishiki's sister, and Yumi. And it really just shows you the closeness these characters have, which is something the original game doesn't really do, because Nishiki and Yumi don't really make many appearances with Kiryu in the actual game, and Zero doesn't include Yumi whatsoever, and Nishikiyama is kind of sidelined a little bit in Zero. So you don't really get to see these characters as close as the game leads you to believe they are. And I think this adaptation does just a really, really fucking good job of showing you how close these characters are. And while we're talking about the characters, how are the characters? Did the characters get translated well from the game to the adaptation? And yeah, I think they did. I think honestly they really did. As for Kiryu, I think Kiryu's character is very interesting because Kiryu is a little bit different. He isn't the big... It's really hard to describe Kiryu. Like, Kiryu is really reserved, and he's really... I would say, he's very smart, he's very streetwise, and he wants to keep himself to himself. And it's still the same in this adaptation, but you see a much more childish side to Kiryu. So obviously, 1995, Kiryu in this adaptation is still a kid. He's still an underling. Like, in the original game, Kiryu is already a pre-established Yakuza. He's already at the very top of the Yakuza food chain by the beginning of the game. And in this adaptation, Kiryu is just an underling. He joins the Yakuza purely because he fucked up and he robbed the Dojima family with Nishikiyama and Yumi. And they only join so they can live, so they don't get killed and whatnot, and to pay off their debt. And essentially, it's just really interesting to see Kiryu and Nishikiyama's dynamic early on, because Kiryu's a lot more childish, he is a lot more goofy, he has a lot more personality to him than he does in Yakuza 0, where he's still very mature and really reserved, and takes a lot for him to crack a smile, if that makes sense. And it's really nice just to see a different side to Kiryu. And I know a lot of people may not like that, but I think it really does show an extra side to Kiryu's character, because for me personally, Kiryu doesn't really grow on you as a character until you get really late into the games, like until Yakuza 5, because that's when Kiryu's character starts to break a little bit. He's less, you know, he's less of a big macho man who just beats the shit out of people and doesn't like crack a smile. Like, yeah, he has moments in, you know, the games before 5, but, you know, besides in like 3 at the very beginning of the game, and I think Yakuza 5 and beyond is where you really get to an emotional grasp on Kiryu as a character, and they really start to develop Kiryu even more, if that makes sense. And I think this adaptation just does a really good job of showing that emotional and more human side of Kiryu a lot faster than the games did. And you really do notice a difference between Kiryu in 1995 and 2005. You know, like I said, Kiryu's a little bit more childish and more open and more expressive in his personality in 1995 than he is in 2005. Now, we haven't seen too much of Kiryu in 2005 in these first 3 episodes. A lot of it's been flashbacks, but it's really interesting to see the difference between him. Kiryu is a lot more quiet, more reserved, more, you know, he's more down to earth. He doesn't want, that's not the right word, but he's more, like, he's not ready to put up with your bullshit. Like, he'll beat the shit out of you, if that makes sense. And there is some scenes, like, I saw that I didn't really think Kiryu would do. Like, when he comes out of prison, he beats up all these guys like he would, but then he's like, oh, I hate taking the bus, give me your keys, and he, like, takes the car. Like, that's not something Kiryu would do, in my opinion. But it's only something really minor that, like, it isn't like Kiryu wants to kill people. Like, in fact, there's a literal flashback where Kiryu tells Nishiki, we don't kill people, which is what I really like. But they're still keeping the no kill rule for Kiryu. So it's like the writers of this show still understand what makes Kiryu fundamentally, which is really great. But yeah, like I said though, there is a nice, there is a big noticeable difference between Kiryu from 1995 and 2005. Now, as for the other characters, I'm only going to go over Nishiki's little sister, and Yumi, mostly because characters like Majima, Saejima, Kazuma, and Date haven't really had too much screen time, and I feel like it wouldn't be right to talk about them just yet anyways. So as for Nishiki, I think Nishiyama has been adapted really well. Nishiki has always kind of been the pretty boy, the guy who's not really been cut out to be a Yakuza. You know, that's basically clear from the beginning of Yakuza 0 and the beginning of Yakuza Kiwami. You know, it's clear that Nishikiyama isn't cut out to be a Yakuza. He isn't as hardened as Kiryu, and he's kind of just there because his best friend's there, if that makes sense. And it really does show you in this adaptation, Nishiki isn't really cut out to be a Yakuza, you know. This guy doesn't even know how to cut his finger off properly. He's crying, he's all over the place when he gets caught. You know, he can't keep his composure, and I think it's really just great to show that, like, Nishiki is a lot more weak, you know. He isn't as hardened as Kiryu. He isn't built like him, if that makes sense. And I think this adaptation really does show a really good job of showing the difference between Kiryu and Nishiki, and it also does a great job of showing the transition Nishiki has made from 1995 all the way to 2005. And I think it's really great, and I'm really excited to see just more of what they're going to do with Nishikiyama as a character. And as for Yumi, I think Yumi's really interesting. Yumi didn't really have much of a character in the original game, mostly because she gets 0 screen time throughout the plot, and it's just really interesting to see the way they've adapted her. You know, she has an older sister now who is basically part of the Yakuza underground, basically, and she is the main plot of this game. So a lot of people were wondering what happened to Haruka. Why is Haruka not essential to the plot? Basically, Haruka has just been replaced by her mother. Yes, I said mother. So basically, in this adaptation, Yumi is not Haruka's mother. At least she isn't so far. Maybe we might get a plot twist that she actually is the mother. But so far, Haruka's mother is actually Yumi's older sister, which is very interesting. And it does really call into question how Haruka is going to play a role in this story, because she has been introduced, but I'm not too sure exactly how much she's actually going to play a role in this actual story. But it's nice to know that Haruka is here, and it does really set her up for like the later games. But it's really interesting to see that, you know, Haruka's mom has taken this role of being the one that the Yakuza are after. And it's really interesting to see as well how else she is connected to this plot, because we know she killed some Omi Alliance people, but it does seem that she has a lot more of a connection to the Yakuza world than we actually know, especially since she's been part of the criminal underworld since 1995, and there's definitely something that went on with Yumi's mother, so I guess we'll get to know more as that goes on. But it's really interesting to see how much they've changed Yumi as a character, and I think it's a good thing how they've changed her, because Yumi, like I said, she didn't have much of a character in the original game, thanks to her just not having much screen time, and for some reason Yokoyama and Nagoshi just saying, yeah, we're just not gonna add it to Yakuza 0. You know, I don't know, it's really stupid, but it's really interesting the way they've gone with her. What's even more interesting is that they decided to give Nishikiyama's sister an actual character. No, I don't think she actually appears in the original game. I think she's referenced, but she's never actually shown, and it's really interesting to see her dynamic with Yumi, especially Yumi. Her and Yumi are really close, and I'm really curious to see how these characters will develop over the story. Obviously, we have 3 more episodes left that drop on the 31st of October, so on Halloween. But it's just really interesting to see the dynamic between Nishiki's sister and Yumi. I thought Nishiki's sister's name, so I'm just gonna call her Nishiki's sister. But it's really interesting to see that dynamic because they're really close, but it also shows that it seems like Yumi is somewhat jealous of how open and how she adapts to the situation they're in, which I can't really be asked getting into. But if you've seen the adaptation, then you know what I'm on about. You know, there's a scene where they're in Serena and as hosts, and like how Nishiki's sister is really great at the job and really into it, whereas Yumi seems almost jealous and almost disheartened that she can't be the exact same, and it's really interesting to see that dynamic. One thing I can say though, I'm not a big fan of yet, is that she doesn't really have much of a connection with Nishiki. Obviously her and Nishiki have interacted, but it hasn't really shown how close they are, and maybe they might get more into it as the story progresses. But so far I haven't really seen like a super closeness to her and Nishiki, which is a little bit of a letdown, since obviously I was hoping to see and understand even further how her death really fucked with Nishikiyama. But hopefully, like I said, we'll see a little bit more of that as the story goes on. So as we're talking about the story is really interesting. So like I said, it does not follow the exact events of the original game. So obviously Yakuza 0 takes place in 1998 to 1989, sorry. So obviously Kiryu's 20 years old and Majima is 24 years old in the events of that game, which makes them in Yakuza Kiwami 37 and 41 respectively in those games, which takes place in 1995. But for this TV show adaptation, that's been completely changed. So Kiryu has to be around 18 or 19 in this events of the story in 1995. Basically just because Kiryu is still, like I said, very childish and very young, and obviously Kiryu's actor does not look 37 years old. But also it has to take, and a lot of the events have taken place differently. Obviously, like Saejima, for example, Saejima is actually in this adaptation, which is, like I said, set in 1995, a lot of it, and Majima and Saejima both appear. Majima still has both of his eyes. Saejima is not in prison, so it's really interesting that a lot of the events have been pushed along, which just made me question how events, if they do like carry on with the series, how events of like Yakuza 4 are going to play out, because obviously I don't think Saejima is going to do the hit, because I think he actually goes to prison. If I'm not mistaken, he gets shot and I think he gets picked up by Date and he gets sent to prison. So it's really interesting to see how they fucked around with the story a little bit. And it also shows us that Majima lost his eye from fucking around with the guns and shooting people in public and stuff like that, rather than betraying Shimino like it shows us in Yakuza 0. And like throughout this adaptation, there's multiple changes, not just with like Majima and like the whole events of that and stuff like that. For example, like the Omi are the ones who actually got the money robbed from them, and I believe in the credits it's been leaked that there's a character called Goda, and if you know anything about Yakuza Kiwami 2, then there's a character called Goda Ryuji, who is the main antagonist of Yakuza 2, and also a fan favorite character. So there's a big possibility that Ryuji might appear in this game. They might combine both Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2 into one story, which I wouldn't personally mind. But yeah, like a lot of the events have just been messed around with, and I think it's for a much better reason. It definitely feels more cinematic and a lot more serious. I feel like if you adapted Yakuza as a game series 1-to-1, it wouldn't really work, because Despite the characters feeling so real, a lot of the world doesn't feel real. Like, it's really hard sometimes to believe that the Yakuza is this stupid or this gullible, and this adaptation really does a good job of making the Yakuza feel extremely serious and feel like an actual crime organization that tolerates no bullshit. And that's what I really like about it. Like, it has a much more crime drama tone to it. And it's really interesting because as somebody who's a massive fan of the Yakuza series, you believe that you know what's going to happen, but then something completely different happens, and it's really interesting. And I think for anybody who's a fan of this series, can really get behind this adaptation and can really enjoy it. Obviously, if you're going into this expecting a one-to-one adaptation, then you're going to be greatly disappointed. But if you're going into this as, you know, very optimistic and willing to accept something new and see a new perspective on the Yakuza series, then I think you'll really enjoy this adaptation like I did. And like Yokoyama said, it's supposed to be a reimagining of the original game, not a retelling. And like I said, if Yokoyama, you know, said if Yokoyama is pleased with this adaptation and he's the one who writes most of these Yakuza games, then I feel like, you know, as a fan base, we can at least try to, you know, enjoy it. Obviously, if you guys don't enjoy it, then don't lie to yourself. But personally, I feel like you should go into this a little bit more optimistic and try to at least appreciate it for what it is and try to enjoy it for what it is, because I think it's done a really great job. I think already from these first 3 episodes that it's a lot better than the original 2007 adaptation, and honestly I'm hoping that I'll enjoy this version of events way more than the original game, because like I said, Yakuza Kiwami is not one of my favorite games in the series. It's one of my least favorite games in the series for a multitude of reasons, for story, characters, blah blah blah. I just really like the way this adaptation has really, you know, started off, and it's really taking liberties but in a good way, you know. And I think a lot of computer game fans are very scared when games go off script when it comes to live action. You know, the video game adaptations have not had a good rep with like Resident Evil and whatnot, and a bunch of other stuff. I can't think of anything on the top of my head, but you know, recently we've had great adaptations like the Sonic movie, the Mario movie, Fallout, and I think Yakuza Like a Dragon, the TV show, honestly can sit comfortably alongside them as a great adaptation. And like I said, I'm excited to see what the final 3 episodes have in store. That's basically all I wanted to go over. I know I may have been repeating myself and stuff like that, but I usually have a script written down, but I wanted to just dump my thoughts from just watching those episodes and tell you guys. And let me know if you guys enjoying the adaptation, or if you think it's shit. You know, I really would like to see other people's opinions on this, because as somebody, you know, who's open to the changes, I really do like the changes. You know, I think they're really great. I'm really curious just to see what the fan perception of this is. You know, do you guys dislike it? Do you guys enjoy it? What do you dislike about it? What do you enjoy about it? What do you hope to see for the final 3 episodes? Let me know in the comment section down below, because, you know, I really would like to see that. But yeah, also, I have another video coming on the way, so later this week we should have another video on the channel, so keep your eyes out for that. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. It's been your boy Remy. Peace out.